And here we go. So other punctuation, we're dealing with different types of punctuation other than what we've sort of encountered with just the simpler period, commas. We'll be talking a little bit about commas today too. So after you finish this lesson, you will be able to use punctuation correctly, such as end marks, commas, hyphens, parentheses, quotation marks, colons, and semicolons. And you'll run into this some, some of these more than others. Quotation marks you'll probably see more than you will parentheses and so forth, so on. But we'll go over how we want to use those in our writing. So, short audio here.
Punctuation makes written text easier to read. You already have learned about end marks and commas, but there are other types of punctuation important to reading and writing text. These marks include hyphens, parentheses, quotation marks, colons, and semicolons.
Yeah, so I've mentioned this before, words are the primary way that we communicate in, a written response, but punctuation is also really important because that helps us break up the ideas, inserts our pauses. It tells us the other information that we need that the words don't relay by themselves. And of course, there's a variety of them. And like I said, some of them get used a little more than others, but let's take a look here. So for starters, the hyphen, you're going to see that a lot when it comes to combining two modifiers. So we want to combine two words together that are used as modifiers. So their example, Dr. Mays is a well-liked teacher. You'll see well used hyphenated a lot, like the well-trodden road, the well-hidden treasure, whatever it may be. Well is one of those words that you'll encounter that gets hyphenated quite a bit. Parentheses are used to separate text. We ate at Las Palmas on Franklin Road. So the parentheses, what you'll see inside parentheses is something that helps explain the sentence. The sentence alone has to be grammatically correct. So whatever's in the parentheses can be removed and you still have a complete sentence. And it might sound a little weird, but I almost think of it as somebody like whispering information in your ear that's relevant to the sentence. A lot of times you'll see like statistics or stuff that are separated out by parentheses. And then quotation marks indicates exact speech. So you've probably heard before, somebody say, quote this, or quote unquote this person or that person. So it is a direct speech from somebody. So you would say, quote, you should have watched the game last night, he said, unquote. It always indicates somebody's exact language, not paraphrased. In research, if you're writing something journalistically or historically, you're going to have a citation after a quotation and tell people where you encountered that, where you found that information, whether it's from a book or a newspaper article or on television or something. You're going to have a citation that lets people know where you found that. And a colon is used to introduce examples or lists. It must follow a complete idea. So just like parentheses, you need a complete sentence. You have to have a complete idea in front of a colon. So here, their example, I have 3 sisters, Tina, Marie, and Lisa. So there you see, we have a complete idea ahead of that. We have a complete sentence, but we're adding additional information, and we're using the colon to show that a list follows, or an idea or an example. And the semicolon, so that's used to separate two complete ideas. Their example, he lost his car keys. His sister didn't have a spare set. I've mentioned this before. You can insert and in place of a semicolon, and it should make sense. So you could say he lost his car keys and his sister didn't have a spare set. It should make sense if you replace a semicolon with and. And it's something, semicolons are something you're going to use sparingly. You don't want to use it to always combine two complete ideas. You'll have it's sort of used as a sense of style. So you'd use it sparingly when it would make sense. And it's something that you might want to, when you're proofreading or editing, see it's like, well, maybe this semicolon is better here than and then vice versa. You don't want to overuse them. And our little box text here, hyphens are used to combine two modifiers when the two words have a combined meaning, such as low budget movie, which I mentioned, there's a ton of words there that you can use together, but you're going to encounter the same ones quite a bit, like well, or high and low. You'll see like high budget, low budget. Those are used quite a bit, to combine with other words. High rent area, if you live in, like a nice neighborhood or something like that, or low rent area, vice versa. And then our second box, remember that when you have a first parentheses or quotation mark, you need a second one to close the quotation or parenthetical statement. So yeah, if you're going to use that, you have it's an opening and closing. If you start with a quotation, you have to close the quotation. If you start with the parentheses, you have to close the parentheses. That's pretty straightforward. Okay, and let's go over to our quiz. So here it's saying using logic, punctuation could change the meaning of a sentence, especially with commas. For example, let's leave Sam or let's leave Sam. Examine each sentence's structure carefully to be sure all punctuation is correct. So in their examples here, the second one is instructing people to leave Sam. Like we are going to leave Sam behind because there's no comma there. Let's leave Sam. Whereas the first example, let's leave Sam, you're directing Sam to leave with you. So we're leaving together, and then the comma is directing for whom you are speaking to, or to whom you're speaking to. And our first question, Janet and Manny were present at the meeting. Logan and Allison were out of town and could not attend. What type of punctuation do we need here? Amina, are you available, or you want me to go ahead and go through it?
I'm not sure, but I think it's B.
B, yeah, exactly. And just like we said, so you would want and there if you didn't have the semicolon. So Janet and Manny were present at the meeting, and Logan and Allison were out of town. And here, this is a good example of where you might want to put a semicolon, because now you're not using repetitive words, right? So, if you'd have those two ands close together at the meeting, and Logan and Allison were out of town, semicolon works great there to combine those two complete ideas. So on down to our paragraph. So here it says, Dear Mr. Harvey, at Eastern Airways, we pride ourselves on being a, got to put a hyphen somewhere. Where do we want the hyphen? Is it D?
I think so. Customer focused in airline.
Yes. Yep. D. So D, you're going to have those two modifiers put together, right? We don't need any other punctuation there. We're just using a modifier for airline. So we pride ourselves on being a customer-focused airline. Customer hyphen focused airline. And then there actually should be a period at the end of that, but none of the options had one. So anyway, customer focused airline. We take the feedback of our passengers very seriously, and we make every effort to improve our service according to the feedback we receive. Our customer satisfaction department has received your letter describing your lost baggage experience on your June 11th flight from Newark to Jacksonville. We are deeply sorry that your luggage what do you think here?
A.
Close. We're going to go with B. You're on the right track. You want parentheses, but it's going to close off that phrase, right? That's what we're looking for. So here it's offsetting additional information. We are deeply sorry that your luggage, including your fishing gear, did not arrive in time for the beginning of your vacation in Florida. And we see, complete idea without that little bit of information. We can still say we are deeply sorry that your luggage did not arrive in time for the beginning of your vacation in Florida. We understand this incident caused you a significant inconvenience. In your letter to us, you wrote,
C.
See, now they're quoting him here. So what they're saying is, in your letter to us, you wrote, and then they're giving an example of exactly what he said. So we're going to want quotations, right?
Yes, the quotation mark.
And here's another thing. If you run into this, Amina, on a test, if you look down, if you finish the phrase, you'll notice they have a quotation mark down here, right? So into that sentence, then right there, it's like, okay, well, I need a quotation somewhere in there at the beginning so I have a beginning and end of the quote. So in your letter to us, you wrote me. In the letter to us, you wrote me. Sorry, start over. I'm getting confused. In your letter to us, you wrote, comma, giving me $100 to buy a few items of clothing was no compensation for not having my clothing and fishing gear for 3 days and having to purchase and rent replacements with my own money, unquote. We agree with your assessment. We understand that you incurred significant expenses for clothing and fishing gear rentals while you waited for your luggage to arrive. We would like to provide you with the following compensation. Oh, need another choice there. So they're offering compensation here, and then a list of items. What would we want to go with here?
B, I think.
We go with C. And I'll show you here. So it says, we would like to provide you with the following compensation.
Okay, I see now.
And and then it's one of those things that you're going to have to read on, and you'll notice that it's actually a list. So it says, for the clothing you had to purchase, reimbursement for your fishing gear, rental charges, and a voucher worth $400 toward the purchase of a future flight on Eastern Airways. So there you see, we had a number of items, and we're going to set that off with a colon. All right. So D, B, A, C for our paragraph.
The third one, I put B, and I is saying wrong.
The third one or the
one,
second?
two, yeah. No, the first one I put D, second one B, third one B.
The third one's A.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Even though I change it, I can. Okay.
Yeah, that system's a little weird. I've run into that too, where I wasn't able to change it. Yeah, you want to make sure that it's the you have the quotation mark in front of giving.
Yeah, I put it. It was, yes, you tell me, but I choose wrong choice.
Oh, okay.
It happened to me a lot.
Okay. Yeah, I've done that too, and I've accidentally submitted it. And once you submit it, it won't let you. It'll let you change it, sort of like you can add that.
I know, but you cannot.
But it won't. Yeah, it doesn't show up as correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we'll move on to the workbook. Okay. So same thing here. We have a few examples. So punctuation makes written text easier to read, like end marks and commas. Other punctuation marks are meant to help clarify text. Hyphens combine two modifiers. Parentheses separate content that may not flow within the text. Quotation marks indicate the exact words that a person has spoken or written. Colons introduce lists or examples, and semicolons separate two complete ideas. Sentences below show how punctuation can make text easier to read. Here, sentence without punctuation, and we can see it gets really messy and cluttered, and we don't know where to pause. We don't know how to separate this information. So it says, this is a must-win game. We must do three things to play tough. Defense, force turnovers, and put the ball in the end zone, yelled the high-strung coach. It's just a big bunch of words. But if we add the correct punctuation, we know where to pause. We know where things are occurring. So here you see we have a quotation. This is a must-win game. And we must do three things to win. And we have a list. Play tough defense, force turnovers, and put the ball in the end zone. Unquote, yelled the high-strung coach. So up here, we don't, we get all the way to the end before we realize that it's actually some type of quote. It's the coach yelling. Here, we know right off the bat that this is a quotation. And then we have the separation of two complete ideas with the semicolon. And then we have the colon here, so we know that there's a list coming up, or we're offsetting, a series of information. And then at the end, we have an exclamation point, and then we have the quotation to set it off. And then we finish off with who was saying it. And here it says, remember to place the period in a sentence outside the close of the parentheses. However, place the period inside the end quotation mark. So if your sentence ends with a quotation, your period will come before the quotation. Last thing on that sentence will be the quotation mark. So it's like, he said, goodbye to you all. So there would be, quote, goodbye to you all, period, quotation mark. And then our next text box, when a question is part of a quotation, place the question mark inside the end quotation mark. So any type of punctuation that ends, and perfect example right here is we see the coach is yelling. So he says, play tough defense, force turnovers, and put the ball in the end zone. You see that the exclamation point is inside the quotation, and then we end it with a quotation mark, yelled the high-strung coach. So yeah, inside the quotation mark. When it is not, place the question mark outside the end quotation mark. So punctuation goes inside a quotation, outside of parenthetical marks or parentheses. And then here we have Hyphen. One of Harrison Ford's best known roles is Indiana Jones. And then, use of parentheses, last winter, I reread Catch-22 by Joseph Heller, and our parentheses, my favorite author. Additional information there, some explanation. Quotation marks, quote, did you enjoy your holiday? Question mark, quote, she asked. Colon, Sydney has 3 pets, colon, a dog, a cat, and a turtle. And our semicolon, Eliza likes going to the theater, semicolon, she saw Wicked last Saturday. Okay. And here we go, workbook and our test taking tips. Hyphens are most commonly used when an adjective or adverb is combined with a participle. For example, good looking man, late arriving guest, custom built car, and well known writer. And yeah, you'll see there they use well as one of the examples. So that's one you'll run into a lot. And there's a lot of ways to to hyphenate those words to combine modifiers. Okay, and our first question here, will you join us for a barbecue on Labor Day? She asked the new neighbor. What correction should we make here? Insert a comma after day. Insert a quotation mark before will. Remove the question mark after day, or insert a hyphen after new. What do we want to do?
I think A. I'm not sure.
Insert a comma after day. We want to insert a quotation mark before will. B. Yep, you see right here, we have the quotation mark at this side. So we know we need to start with what? So will you join us for a barbecue on Labor Day? We're going to have a quotation mark at the beginning to offset that entire quotation. And then we know she asked the new neighbor, will you join us for a barbecue on Saturday or on Labor Day? So B for that one. And next, I am starting my diet tomorrow, assuming I stick to my plan. So what do we want to correct here? A, tomorrow. Do we need a comma before assuming I stick to my plan? Or do we want a colon before that? Or do we want C? Do we want to put that in parentheses instead of quotation marks? Or D, do we set it off with a semicolon? I'll add this. I am starting my diet tomorrow as a complete phrase. It's a complete sentence. So what will we want to do with assuming I stick to my plan?
Don't know.
It's the parentheses. C.
I thought that one, and I just say maybe I say it's wrong.
Yeah. So C, because for starters, what it's when it whatever it gives you underline or what it's wanting you to change. Do I have one thing you want to identify first? Do I have a complete sentence without that? Do I have a complete idea? And here I am starting my diet tomorrow. You know that, okay, well, that is a complete idea. So what out of our 4 choices will make sense? So the quotations are problematic because we don't have any direction as far as who said it. If it was, I am starting my diet tomorrow, she said, comma, assuming I stick to my plan, it's something like that, then we would know to use quotation marks. We don't have a list of information, so the colon doesn't sound very good, right? So if this was, I am starting my diet tomorrow, colon, and then we get a list of things she's going to do for her diet, like instead of assuming I'll stick to my plan, she was like, I am starting my diet tomorrow. I am going to eat more grains, more vegetables, and more fruit. Then a colon would work. And then on D, you know, we don't have a complete idea after tomorrow, assuming I stick to my plan, is not a complete sentence. So the semicolon doesn't make too much sense there. So we know that the parentheses, by process of elimination, is going to be the way to go. Okay. And vote, a basic voting guide. The founders wrote the Constitution of the United States to form a more perfect union, establish justice, and ensure domestic tranquility. What do we want to cap off this sentence with? A, B, D, or A, B, C, or D? Looks like we're starting a quote here, right? Because they have the founders wrote the Constitution of the United States, quote,
B.
B, yep. So, and here's a perfect example where we're talking about punctuation and everything. So to form a more perfect union, establish justice, and ensure domestic tranquility. It looks a little weird, but that period is coming before the quotation. So it's and ensure domestic tranquility, period, quotation mark. And that makes B the right answer there. And then to help uphold these principles, every U.S. citizen over the age of 18 has the right and the responsibility to vote in local, state, and federal elections. Let's review some basic principles that every voter should follow before casting a ballot. The first step in the voting process is to research the candidates and issues that will be on the next ballot. We have a semicolon. So what do we want to do after that?
C.
Close, but we want D. You're on the right track because you have the right hyphen, right? Well-informed is the correct modifier. We want that hyphen in between well and informed, but we don't have a quotation anywhere, so we'll use D. So we have the next ballot, semicolon, a well-informed voter is a good voter, period. And we know that with the semicolon that we need a complete idea after it. And that's what we have here. A well-informed voter is a good voter. That by itself would also be a complete sentence. Okay, and then months before Election Day, you will find summaries and opinions about the candidates and issues in newspapers, magazines, blogs, and websites. Be aware that a writer may have a certain agenda for or against a candidate or an issue how are we going to separate therefore?
A and B, they look the same.
So you're close. B is what we want to go for because we have a semicolon after issue. And up here, we just have the comma. So one way to look at this, whenever you use those transitional words, like we talked about earlier in the week, or, you know, if you're using nevertheless, however, therefore, look at where it falls in the sentence. If it's at the beginning of a sentence or before just like an opening phrase, it's probably going to be set off with just commas. Here, it's in the middle of the sentence, more or less. So we know, be aware that a writer may have a certain agenda for or against a candidate. We have a complete idea. And once we get to therefore, we need to set that off with a semicolon. We need that additional punctuation. And if you think about it, you can use and here this almost the same way that you use and with just a solo semicolon. So, have a certain agenda for or against a candidate or an issue, and therefore you should read several sources to form a balanced point of view. So always look to see where those transitional words fall in a sentence. That'll help you decide whether or not you need just commas or you need that semicolon. So as you gather information about the candidates and issues, you should determine which people and ideas align with your needs, values, and beliefs. Another important step in the voting process is to find out where you will vote. After registering, you should receive a voter card in the mail that tells you where to vote. If you do not receive a card in the mail, call your state's Board of Elections to find out whether your registration has been recorded properly. When you arrive at your voting location on election day, be sure to have with you one of the following pieces of identification. What do we want to set this off with? That's followed up with, be sure to have with you one of the following pieces of identification: military identification card, driver's license, or utility bill.
Sí.
A, colon, not the semicolon. You're headed in the right direction there. Yeah, because we're setting off a list of items. So one of the following pieces of identification, colon, a driver's license, a military identification card, or a utility bill. So B, D, B, A. Okay. And now, how to make barbecue sauce. Even though you can find ready-made barbecue sauce at the store. So it looks like we need to hyphenate that somewhere maybe. Where would we want to hyphen? Ready-made. So B, right? We have two modifying words that are connected. Ready-made barbecue sauce at the store. It's never quite as good as making it from scratch. Secret recipes for barbecue sauce have become the pride of barbecue masters in every state. If you're looking for a classic sauce that's easy to bake, look no further. This recipe has the perfect balance of sweet, sour, and spicy. You will need to set an hour or so to make your barbecue sauce. A good sauce requires time to cook so that the flavor is rich. First, add about 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil to a pan at medium heat. Add a chopped onion and 3 cloves of pressed garlic to the oil. Wait about 5 minutes and then add the following ingredients. Multiple ingredients. We're following it up with a list of items. What would we want to do?
A.
C. Got to go with the colon again.
Oh.
Yeah, you're getting there. So wait about 5 minutes and then add the following ingredients: colon, 1.5 cups of ketchup, 1/2 cup of apple cider vinegar, 1/4 cup of Worcestershire sauce, 1/3 cup of dark brown sugar, and a tablespoon of chili powder. Depending on how spicy you like your sauce, add Tabasco sauce to taste. Then stir the ingredients slowly, allowing them to come to a low boil. Finally, reduce the heat and allow the sauce to simmer for about an hour. While your sauce is simmering, fire up the barbecue and prepare your favorite meats for grilling. This sauce is great on ribs, beef, chicken, and pork tenderloin. Serving one kind of meat surely will impress your guests. However, I think we encountered that just a minute ago, therefore. How do we separate however from the rest of the sentence?
B.
A. So you're on the right track. We want to offset the however on both sides, but just like where we saw therefore earlier, we have a complete idea before however. So serving one kind of meat surely will impress your guests. That's a complete sentence, but we're not finished, right? So we're adding however. So we need semicolon, however, comma, the best barbecue masters know to serve 2 or more kinds of meat. Excuse me. And then brush the barbecue sauce on the meat near the end of cooking. If you apply the sauce too early, it will cause the sauce to burn instead of brown. Now you can tell your friends that you are a true barbecue master. And how do we finish that off? Because there again, we have a complete idea. We have a complete sentence without any other information. So what can we eliminate there? What looks good?
Not so sure.
So if you think, we don't have a quote, right? So quotation marks, they wouldn't make sense here. You know, we don't have anybody saying, you know, Fred said, comma, quotation mark, now you can tell your friends. So we don't have anything like that. So that will leave us parentheses of some sort.
D.
D. So right here, we have a full statement. Now you can tell your friends that you are a true barbecue master. D, parenthesis, without giving away your secret recipe, parenthesis, and then we finish with the punctuation outside the parentheses, right? So second paragraph, B, C, A, D, and
Yeah.
finally,
Last.
yeah, the last one here. And we have hurricane preparedness. So ask yourself, am I prepared for a hurricane? For those of us who live near the coast. So what we want to do here. So in this case, even though it doesn't really mention this in the lesson itself, you know, we mentioned that quotations set off exact speech.
A.
So even if in this case where it's somebody sort of compelling you to say something, and you know they're saying ask yourself, but they're using exact speech. They want you to ask yourself this particular question. So we want to set that off in quotation marks. So ask yourself, A, am I prepared for a hurricane? And then we put our question mark right before the end of the quotation. So ask yourself, A, am I prepared for a hurricane? For those of us who live near the coast, being well prepared. What kind of punctuation do we need here?
Well prepared. A.
C, what we want. So we don't have a quotation, right? All we're doing is hyphenating well prepared. And that's why I mentioned, earlier, you'll see well used a lot in hyphenated words. So being well prepared citizens is critical, because again, we don't have a quote, and in this sense, the parentheses isn't really setting off additional information or anything. We don't have a complete sentence without that bit of information. Excuse me. So C is going to be the correct answer there. Let me go on. The Gulfport Emergency Response Agency is sponsoring Hurricane Awareness Week from June 21st through June 27th. The purpose of this week is to help families respond to 3 important hurricane questions. The answers may save lives during a hurricane. Why is a hurricane dangerous? How might a hurricane affect me? What action should I take in the event of a hurricane? To answer these questions, participate in the following Hurricane Awareness Week activities. Study famous hurricanes to learn about their causes and effects. Help weather experts track hurricanes in the Atlantic, Caribbean, and Gulf of Mexico. Wednesday, learn about these hurricane hazards. We have a list following it. You have to set off that information somehow. How would we want to set that off?
B, as a boy.
B, yes, colon, right? So learn about these hurricane hazards, colon, storm surge, high winds, tornadoes, and flooding. Thursday, create a family safety plan. Friday, build a disaster kit. Oh, we got a whole list here. Build a whole disaster kit, including batteries, bottled water, and flashlights.
I'm not sure, but I think B.
It's D.
D.
Yeah. So this one's a little tricky, right? Because we actually have a list of information here for one. But what you want to look for is, first off, we have a complete idea. Build a disaster kit. So that's a complete sentence on its own. And then parentheses, including batteries, bottled water, and flashlights. So the one thing here that makes it different from using, say, the colon in A, so build a disaster kit, colon, including batteries, bottled water, flashlights. You wouldn't use including in that situation. You would just go straight to your list of items. So we know that's not right, because we need to include that somehow, and the parentheses make more sense there. In B, building a disaster kit, including, if we don't put including in the parentheses, then we no longer have a complete sentence. We have an awkwardness there. So if you take away the parentheses, you're left with building a disaster kit, including, dot, dot, dot. There's missing information, and we don't have a complete sentence anymore. So that's not right. And then C, we don't have complete sentences on either side of that semicolon. So yes, build a disaster kit, complete sentence, but including batteries, bottled water, and flashlights doesn't make sense without more information. So the semicolon doesn't work in that sense. And for that, we know we have D that's left. And that's the only one that's really going to make sense. So finally, A, C, B, and D. Okay.